Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of reminders. Do visit the Resource Center and get all the information you want to read, save, or refer to from the voluminous partner resources of brand videos, exhibitor brochures, event catalogs, and the list of upcoming events. Also, do visit our partner booths by simply clicking on the exhibition room button at the bottom of your screen. Chat, speak, or video call any of them, and do come back to the live sessions again by clicking on the plenary session button at the bottom of your screen. With that, we move on to the panel discussion titled, Is the Virus Propelling Supply Chain and Distribution Models Reinvention in FMCG and Retail? And it's an honor and privilege to first introduce the members of this panel. Avinash Kant Kumar, Executive Vice President, Supply Chain, Jubilant FoodWorks. Kamaldeep Singh, President, Food and FMCG, Future Group. Manoj Kothari, Vice President and Head of Supply Chain, Godrej Africa, USA and Middle East, Godrej Consumer Products. Nigamant Srivatsan, Director, Customer Success, PandaCorp. Praharsh Chandra, Co-founder and COO, Shadowfax. Vinay Kushwaha, Vice President, Supply Chain, Britannia Industries. Welcome, gentlemen. This session will be moderated by Rahul Prithiani, Director, CRISIL Research. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you, Evan. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure interacting with you through this medium. And I think clearly from a supply chain point of view, I think COVID has left a very big impression. And it's been a fairly large disruptive event, not just from a health perspective, but it has also led to, a seminal change in customer behavior, demand patterns, as well as, as well as the sales channel, vendor ecosystem, which has had to react to the changes that have kind of actually transpired on the ground. It has clearly meant that all corporates have had to relook at the way they have been doing business, and resilience of the supply chain and the distribution channels has been really tested in the current scenario. We at CRISIL Research clearly believe, these changes are longer term in nature, and many of them will leave a lot of structural imprints, both on customer behavior as well as planning and cost from a corporate perspective. With this as a backdrop, I would like to take the discussion ahead with our panelists. So first, I will come to Avinash. So Avinash, what are the kind of changes that you foresee or what you have seen over the last few months, and how do you think, the overall ecosystem across the entire supply chain delivery has really reacted over the last few months, and what are the changes that you've seen? And given that, hygiene and quality has also become a priority, how do you see things really evolving going forward?
Sure. Thanks, Rahul. So just to set the context, I work with Jubilant FoodWorks, and we run 1,300 odd restaurants of Domino's Pizza and Dunkin' Donuts in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. So I'll talk more about the food supply chain. So there is a significant increase in home-based consumption of food in COVID times. People are preferring to get food delivered to them at their home rather than moving out. And while there are marginally fewer people ordering food, the order sizes have gone up because of more family members working from home. So there is this feature of zero contact delivery. There is nil physical interaction in placing the order or delivering the product or collecting the payments. So order taking and payments both have gone completely digital. Historically, high number of app downloads, call centers have stopped functioning. So I think the trend that will continue to exist in the longer term will be the extent of the online ordering and the digital payment.
Avinash, your voice is breaking.
Going to happen is the multifold increase in the direct-to-consumer businesses. With the increase in online ordering and digital payments, we will see many more brands coming up like Mamaearth and Sugar in personal care, Asia's Zapfresh, Vegile, etc. in food, Boat Lifelong in electronics, Wakefit in home furnishing, etc. It's going to be almost $100 billion addressable market by 2025. So these are the changes, these are the trends that we are seeing as happening right now. And going forward, I think some of this will last for a long time. Yeah?
Okay. Moving on, Vinay, just wanted to understand from you, based on customer behavior, at least what we have heard and seen and experienced, there have been a lot of changes in terms of the overall demand patterns, in terms of the customer sizes, SKUs, and fulfillment has become a fairly large challenge. And given that, there have been also changes in the overall distribution channels. So what are the trends you've seen, and, how have you kind of, adjusted your business models?
Yeah, good afternoon to everybody. I think so we sat in a position of advantage, when the virus hit our country. One is that we have a fairly high decentralized operation. We have over 100 manufacturing units all over the country. And while we are a company which is pan-India, but we are also very regionalized and very localized in the way we manufacture and distribute. In fact, one of our key metrics we measure ourselves is distance to market. Because our products are light in weight and they are fragile. So the lesser you transport and handle, you maintain the integrity of your products. So our supply chain was designed to be efficient and designed to deliver to local markets and local needs. So in terms of distribution, the primary distribution, which is getting our products from our factories to our depots, was something which wasn't a challenge because it was all being serviced within the region or within the states. So crossing borders, doing long distance transportation, which possibly was a disadvantage to companies which were more organized in ways where they built fewer plants to distribute nationally. We didn't have that disadvantage to begin with. The second thing that happened, as we saw, is that because of fewer availability of vehicles to transport goods, we resorted increasingly to doing direct dispatches from our factories to customers. So idea was to cut short the whole supply chain and reduce the number of partners engaged, largely driven by the fact that you didn't have the entire infrastructure working to how it was pre-COVID times. So you had pre-COVID, we used to do roughly 10% of our volumes used to go direct from our factories to our distributors or to our customers. And during COVID, the first quarter, we were doing almost 25% of our national sales volumes, which were going direct from our plants to our customers. And then I think from quarter 2 to quarter 3 onwards, we've seen that decline a bit, but we are still holding on to levels of 70 to 18%. So we've seen a table shift of our direct dispatch efficiency moving from a 10% level to a table which is now today sort of, at about 70 to 18%. Now, this means a couple of things. So one is that, we get our products faster to our customers. Second is, obviously, it makes us far more efficient in terms of our distribution cost and all of that. So I think that's the second big thing that we saw happening as far as our distribution is concerned. In terms of front-end demand, I think the big change that we saw happening is that with more consumption happening at home, the need for larger packs, family packs versus the small packs which are more, out-of-home consumption packs. Traditionally, most businesses in FMCG, including ours, was growing at the back of small packs, which are takeaway packs, carry packs, which people consume out of home. Whereas what started happening is that there was a shift towards larger packs. Therefore, there was a need for us to reorganize our portfolio and start focusing on larger packs, which are also more efficient to manufacture, more efficient to produce. They generate better gross margins for the company. So it was a win-win situation for us to start focusing on our portfolio, which was more centered towards larger packs and more basic staples. The other thing we felt and we saw happening during times of the virus and the crisis is that people fall back to basic foods, and what really starts working are basics. So while you may have a portfolio which may be very big, but at the end consumers do prefer their most trusted brands. They go back to basics is what really happens, which is what we also experienced. So it was typically a case where we were doing roughly 30 to 35% of our SKUs, which we normally do during normal times, and we were selling at about 120, 130% of our normal sales rate. So, if our business was growing at a certain rate, we were growing at almost about 150 to 200% of that growth rate during this period. So that in turn generated huge backend efficiencies, in our manufacturing system. There were no need for changeovers. We had wrong run lengths in our factories. The entire sort of efficiencies, wastages came down. So overall, the backend benefited, tremendously because of these changes. And I think one more trend which has happened, which all of us been watching, is this growth of e-commerce. Significant growth for our businesses in partnering with some of the e-com players is what we had to shift focus. We did see decline in some channels. We saw decline in some parts of India and some markets, largely because of how the wholesale and the distributor trade was trying to deal with the crisis. We saw modern trade in India also facing certain difficulties and challenges, largely because of footfalls and constraints of people who could actually enter modern trade. So there was relative movement and shifts between different channels to which we had to readjust our distribution and our fulfillment in terms of customer orders. All in all, I would say, as a company, the virus has left us far more efficient. There are lots of learnings. There are, learnings that we have formally recognized, and we have, a fairly formal dashboard in our company, which tracks the first quarter of the COVID and the lessons learned and the benefits we got. And we measure ourselves every month in terms of those metrics and how much are they declining and how much do we need to pull on to some of those metrics that we had established. So I think this crisis will leave us far stronger, than we ever were in the past. And hopefully it should help us, continue innovating, growing, and sustaining the growth that we've seen. Thank you.
Great to hear those points, Vinay. Moving on to you, Praharsh, what we have clearly seen, I think logistics has come to the fore in the current scenario, and there have been clearly, given the growth that we are seeing in terms of the e-commerce space, volume scale up that we are seeing, also, servicing, a lot of pin codes, which probably one would not have serviced earlier. How do you see the overall, 3PL space evolving, and with the pandemic, what are the seminal changes that you've seen there, and how have you adjusted to the customer expectations?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. So, context about our business so that we can get into the details about how that's impacted us a little bit better. So, at Shadowfax, we are a cross-category end-to-end logistics platform, basically dealing in two types of logistics models. One is point-to-point network, which is very similar to Ola Uber. What you do is you pick up a product from one point, deliver it to the other point, and we work specifically with businesses on this. And the other is a hub and spoke logistics model, wherein specific subcategories of B2B and B2C. B2C is your regular e-commerce, where the product might be traveling anywhere in the country from any origin point and deliver it to customers. On the B2B side, you might be delivering it to retailers or depots or any other business that might. So that's who we are as a company right now. Now, broadly speaking, we've seen a tremendous growth overall in the volumes across almost all categories. Like I said, since you're working across categories, we get a good view of what's happening in each and every one of them. So if I were to talk about broad volumes and revenue numbers, we're looking at anywhere between our current run rates being around 2 times more than what we used to do before the pandemic hit. So our peaks are that high right now, and in the upcoming 2 to 3 months, we're predicting that we'll end up at almost 3 times the running volume. I think there's only few categories wherein there is a little bit of catch-up to happen, which is safe food, catching up to the overall home delivery space that was there before the pandemic, but that's also in an upward trajectory. Apart from that, pharmaceuticals, grocery, e-commerce, and specifically for this conversation, FMCG and retail, we've seen a tremendous growth. On FMCG front specifically, the growth numbers, at least for us, have been at least 5 to 6 times than what we used to do. And I believe the industry trends are also looking very similar. And that's to do with very specific online channels that have really, really taken off. Now coming to what specific channels are and what is exactly leading to this growth, there are a lot of things that are happening, but I'll just boil it down to three key headers sort of saying. So one is this whole upturn in direct to consumer model. I think there is an immense push from all brands. They're figuring out ways in which they can enable it a little bit better. And that has seen a tremendous uptick. I think it's one of those strategies which everyone will need to very aggressively work upon, and almost everyone is already doing that. People who had a head start over there saw good volumes immediately post lockdown measures, etc. And I think this is something which is going to continue. And this also, as a subcategory, kind of consumes the whole play of being present in an e-commerce channel, having other online modes of selling. Social commerce is coming in. So brands need to have more ways of selling or getting their products reach the customers. The other is we're seeing an aggressive push towards a more end-to-end 3PL logistics play. Traditionally, FMCG and retail has been a distributor-led logistics network. But now more than ever, we're seeing a larger push by companies to add more resilience into the supply chain ecosystem, which has led to introduction of a lot of players who are helping FMCGs reach retailers in different manner, right? And what's being called internally is a direct to retailer sort of a concept. So just to give you a stat over there, I think we've had more integrations with traditional FMCG companies in the last 8 months than we had in the last 5 years combined. So that's the level of push that is being given by all of these players here. And you can imagine these decisions are all long-term decisions because SAP systems, they're all very core systems. And once you start integrating it with other party players or opening it up, that's a long-term decision that you make there. So an integrated 3PL play plus direct to retailer is another major header that we're seeing a lot of aggression on. And the last one is, and it's an interesting one, is all retailers coming online. I think there has been an unprecedented move of retailers finding avenues to sell their products online. I think we've all seen Flipkart, Swiggy, they've enabled FMCG retail, even mobile phones getting delivered in 45 minutes. That's something which was unheard of. I think we had a major movement so far as food was concerned 4 or 5 years back, wherein this was possible at scale. I think there's another movement that is slowly brewing, wherein you'll see more and more of your grocery products, FMCGs, even retail, fashion, etc., being delivered to consumers in 45 minutes. So a lot of interesting areas to work upon, and I guess we're happy to be in the middle of all of it.
Great to hear that, Prash. Yeah, we all would like a 45-minute delivery for everything. Great. Manoj, coming to you, from a supplier standpoint, how critical has the issue of diversification come up, given that we saw a lot of challenges with many of the suppliers, and how critical it is while you have to keep the considerations of optimizing cost, ensuring availability, especially where you have global supply chains that are involved. And from a supplier standpoint, how have you adjusted and how have your supplier partners kind of, adjusted to this scenario? And are there certain changes that you've made which will be more longer term in nature?
Thanks, Rahul. Just to introduce me, I'm Manoj Kothari. I'm leading supply chain for Godrej Africa, USA, and Middle East. We have close to 17 factories in Africa, and main products are artificial hair colors, bit of skincare, and the soaps. In US also, we have one factory makes hair cream and the shampoos, etc. Our incoming supply chain is pretty global in terms of RMPM, mainly coming from Japan, Korea, China, Malaysia, India, etc. Okay, and plan to lead time is approximately 4 months. Our products are in non-essential beauty category. So going back to your question, Rahul, I think till now the focus was on the optimization, global sourcing, cost containment, economies of scale, etc. From there, I think focus has shifted to risk mitigation. So risk mitigation in terms of offshore supplier versus onshore suppliers. So even inventories, so focus was on reducing inventories or inventory turn. From there, the focus is moved towards the availability. So if you see, the local sourcing comes with a slightly higher cost, right? compared to the global sourcing. But and at suppliers end also, there are a lot of, so Chinese supplier typically will have a scale which is unimaginable by any other suppliers in the world. So they will be purely a little bit costlier. But if you see availability front, then it is must. So as we speak of today, again, the world is purely VUCA world, and initial 2-3 months were kind of mind-blowing uncertainties. But today also, there are no containers available per se globally. Right, there are shortages of containers, and the shipping times have increased by at least 30 days. So whatever we have planned, or the typical operating plan, you have to keep on revising every week or kind of thing. From a supplier's perspective, yes, risk mitigation and the business continuity takes prime role. And as you mentioned, the resilience of supply chain. So it is, when we say it's a global value chain. So when we see about the resilience of supply chain, it is the suppliers' resilience, the supply chain or actual logistics resilience, manufacturing resilience, and the distribution. And like many of co-panelists said, that we are moving towards a more and more D2C. So more and more manufacturing companies are becoming retailer, and more retailers are becoming manufacturing companies in terms of private labels. And of course, consumer behaviors are changing. So many of the retail chains, which they were not keeping our products, they have started keeping our products. And in a CPG space, you buy 20-25% finished good from a 3P. So that supply chain, so they are also suppliers, and we don't call them supplier anymore. They are business partners actually, and your business success is depending on the same. So there is BCP across all facet of supply chain and value chain, I will say. And the cost is, while the incoming cost may go up, but we have also optimized a lot of cost in our manufacturing in terms of SKU rationalization. So earlier marketings or typical marketing wants variety, versus manufacturing wants a standard long runs. So we have optimized that, and that has given us very good kind of savings or nugget some of the cost. That's one thing. We've also gone with the debottlenecking of line and running a SKUs where throughput is higher. And finally, on the last facet of supply chain, we have gone more and more on looking at the profitability of the channels. So there are more modern trade, there are wholesalers, there are e-com, D2C. So we are looking at profitability of each channel, and then deciding. So it is not only the cost at the supplier's end, but it is overall cost, because in our experience, because our products are non-discretionary typically. So it is moving towards more of VFM, that is value for money products, and you have to be agile. So these are some of the thoughts of global supply chain, both from the suppliers end and the manufacturing end, where they are pretty global. And these are the trends we see. I'm sure India is also the same way.
Sure, Manoj. I think interesting points that you made on, SKU rationalization, and very often, we forget that, and also value for money, focus on those products. I think they're quite interesting. Kamaldeep, coming to you, I think some of the similar problems probably, as on the retail front too, that we potentially have seen, and would want your insights on some of them. Managing the demand side fluctuations, channels, sizes, product categories, fulfillment, flexibility. I think many of those challenges is something that you would have encountered in this period. So how have you kind of, adjusted your business plans to kind of, address some of these challenges, and what are the key learnings that are coming out?
So, this was, if you really ask me, to begin with, it was turbulent on both sides. On demand side, you had seen a shift in the way consumer behaves. You had also seen, the way shopper shops also, even though consumption is same, shopping behavior had, changed. And on supply side, you had seen, let's say, a broken supply chain at all levels. There were different, states behaving in a particular way. And in retail, the supply chain challenges are more local because our store in every catchment behaved in a very, very different way. So you might have 10 stores in Pune, but there is one particular store which is following different local, norms because of sensibilities of COVID. So one is demand side got impacted, supply side got impacted, and what really happened was, one, consumer is coming, visiting less often to your stores. So at Avinash has already mentioned, your trips are down, but your ticket size is up. Secondly, in terms of the kind of stores that he or she buys from, small stores like Easy Day, Heritage, saw much higher dependence for completing shopper's basket compared to someone visiting mall store. So there was a shift in demand there as well. Third, there is in the long run, smaller cities have done so much better because you don't really feel like pandemic in many of the smaller cities, but when it comes to metros, the impact is still pretty large. That's the third impact. Fourth, consumer, of course, in the initial phase bought more of essentials, and a very big trend was no food from outside. So all the categories related to health, hygiene, and basic staples, demand increased there as well. Fifth is, as when we were listening to Britannia's story also. Resilient. The distribution system was really tested, and direct to buying directly from suppliers, that really became the norm. So if I were to sum it up, there were multiple challenges. Many problems being local but not being national, so you have to deal with them in a very, very local fashion. Sometimes it translates to the fact that you have to move stock from one store to the another to meet temporary demand. B, a shift in categories only, more reliance on staples, ready-to-eat foods, whereas personal care and beauty taking a complete backseat. C, because your whole network is really stretched from supplier to retailers, and you rationalize SKUs from whatever 3,000 4,000 to work with some basic maybe 1,000 SKUs in retail. That's the fourth one. Fifth, our customer is very, very conscious of quality of food products. So you are extra cautious in communicating to consumers that the staples and fresh articles that he or she is buying from you is completely safe. So there have been multifold challenges, and it has impacted almost everything, from what we consume, how we consume, where we buy it from, how much we buy it from. It has impacted each and everything, and to complement, Nigam also mentioned that most of us had to rely on home delivery as a big model. So overnight, there was discovery of ensuring that consumers are able to order and get deliveries at home. So that meant a lot of change in stores. So our stores transformed into something different. Our DCs transformed into something different. Our shelves completely changed. Shopping norms ensured that your aisle sizes are very different. The way you position categories, which categories you see first, which categories you see last, that also changed. So it was big change impacting everything, Rahul.
Sure, Kamaldeep. I think it's been a very, very busy time for you, given the kind of changes that we've seen, and I can only empathize. But clearly, it has presented a lot of opportunities too. Moving on, Nigamant, from your vantage point, how have you seen the role of technology, and what role has it played, and how do you see things, really evolving, and how have the customer behavior and the desire to take on newer technologies kind of, progressed in this entire journey? If you can throw some light on that.
Sure, thanks, Rahul. I think we heard very similar stories across, right? I think the one thing that everybody in this panel talked about was how demand has shifted across channels, and how that customer behavior changed, leading to how supply chain had to adopt to that, right? I think we call it omni-channel in industry parlance. I think fashion as an industry had it earlier. I think the other industries are just now coping up to that. I think it's going to stay for the future as well. I think it is important for all of us in supply chain to kind of acknowledge that and prep for that, because I mean the customer experience has to be very similar across your chain. People are not going to modern trade; they are going to your local kirana, and he would expect that your product is available there and in the same experience that he gets somewhere, right? So I think for that you would definitely require great agile and responsive supply chain. I think till this, I think, is a common theme which was even there before, not so pronounced. I think it is pronounced now. But when, as a technology player, what we could see emerge was how do I do this, right? What does really agile supply chain really mean? Does it mean I plan really well? Does it mean I invest in digitize? What should I do, right? I think one major theme which we saw coming out was how well are you connected to your network? Now, what does this really mean? Is you might have the best planning systems. You can put out great demand forecasting. You can put out a great operational plan and things like that. But at the end of the day, it is the warehouse manager who's deciding on which truck to go to which customer, right? So that's the decision that the end person is taking. Now, for him to take that decision, how well are you connected to the network? Which would mean that, do you know what supply is available at that warehouse location? Would the transporter know tomorrow what you are planning to ship out? Can you share some of that data with the transporter so that he plans ahead of time? Do you know how your distributors are behaving? What are the stock levels at the distributor? Is he open at that point in time? Is your truck going to reach on time? Should the warehouse manager firefight it because it is delayed later, or can he preempt those decisions ahead of time? Right? For all of this minute decision making, I think be connected with the network became a large point, right? I think a lot of companies throw a lot of emphasis in execution softwares, in execution technology, I should talk about, right? And that driving indirectly your planning as well. The data of execution powering your planning. I think that's a really powerful thing to have. One point I think I would want to stress here is this is not really restricted to the Fortune 500s and these large companies. Panelists that we have here, right? These are even transporters who approached us by saying that I have a problem in arranging for people to sign an LR. Can you enable me through this platform where I can do this without a person dependency? Can I be integrated with the network? Can I know ahead of time what your customers are going to ship out in this area? These are real feedback which came from the transporter network as well, and that's what is satisfying, right? So it is not only one-sided. It's not that digitization is pushed through from these large companies who are looking at it from their eyes, right? So these are feedback which comes from the market, which marries with what the vision of all these companies have in terms of digitization. So that's what we saw in Crux. The power of how companies are interlinked, not only within their own departments, which is say how do I know sales and things like that. It is also across the network, which is your transporters, your customers, your drivers, and things like that.
Sure, Nigaman, the point's well made. I think the two-way interaction and being connected, I think clearly technology playing an important role there. So taking on that point, Avinash, from your standpoint, how have you ensured that, the visibility across the supply chain distribution kind of, remains very strong, and, you are able to kind of, plug all the loopholes, probably, if I may put it, if they are there, and what have you done?
So just as what we are talking about, Rahul, so yes, the supply chain has undergone, kind of an irreversible change in this period of coronavirus, right? So we have seen the growing importance of establishing a visible supply chain. So Nigamant talked about the connection on two sides and looking at each aspect of supply chain and the people who are acting on it. We have seen the importance of establishing that. What it means is to have visibility into the physical as well as the intrinsic status of the product that we are dealing with. It is important to know at any time as to where the consignment is, where is it likely to reach the destination, what is the condition of the product and the temperature, has it faced any shocks, physical shocks, deteriorated in condition. In food products, this is all very important. So how to detect any tempering on the way, for example, right? So all this tracking has eliminated and restricted any uncertainty in the timeliness and quality of product delivery. So that is one thing which has helped, which is having visibility across the various stages of supply chain on the condition of the product and the status of the product, right? We've also understood the importance of having a responsive and flexible supply chain that can sense demand on a dynamic basis, right? And respond to the same in the shortest time. So it's important to know of the likely demand scenario and have a seamless flow of information across all stages of supply chain so that there are no buffer or idle stocks anywhere, and all the players in the value chain can timely respond to the changing demand. So we have seen that having an early indication of the volatility has helped us a lot in coping up with it. In the initial stages of lockdown, we had a complete shutdown of operation. And in 2 weeks' time, we were able to erect back the whole network of 1,300 restaurants. And what helped was this kind of early intimation, early information, what changes are happening, and the right systems in place to manage that volatility. Yeah. So that is what helped us.
Sure. Vinay, from your perspective, I think given that, there have been a lot of changes in the way you operate, and how has been the people challenge, and how have people adjusted, and how have you adjusted to ensure everyone, is well motivated and well served, given that there have been multiple challenges in the operating model, if I were to, put it that way?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, a crisis does is that it throws, practically the rule book out because, you have to respond to daily situations, daily challenges. And particularly if you are an organization where you are spread out all over the country and you have a fairly large number of people employed, whether these are people running plants or running warehouses, depots, or in the customer service functions or procurement functions. I think the whole challenge is how do you maintain a broader framework but allow people to take decisions at all levels? Because the situation demands that the people on the ground take decisions on a real-time basis. I think if one were to be relying on putting notes and getting people to sign offs, the situation is very different. One has to be on their feet and take decisions. So I think almost everybody becomes a leader in the sense that somebody has to supervise somebody else and take decisions, on a real-time basis. I think what really helps and what helped us is a very flexible operating model where we empowered a whole lot of people in terms of decisions that they had to take. Use of social media platforms, creating WhatsApp groups, circulating in real time, status information, uploading videos, allowed us to give decisions on a real time basis. So I think, democratizing the decision-making process, empowering people, delayering decision-making, going in for more flatter structures, I think that is really how you become more agile and responsive to the situation. And I think while being a relatively old and a large organization, I think the agility which we could demonstrate, I think also helped us in terms of delivering the results that we did. And I think going forward, our learnings are that, long-term planning, too many layers in decision-making is probably a thing of the past. I think we really have to look at our structures, delayer as much as we can, empower people, give decision-making authorities while maintaining an overall framework. So I think there are learnings in collaboration, in using simple handheld devices, using smartphones, using social media platforms. How do you connect with everybody? How do you get everybody working, on a real-time basis and taking decisions? So I think that to me was a significant insight in how we work. and how can we transform our ways of working?
Sure, Vinay. Moving on to Praharsh, maybe now we have very limited time left. Maybe if you can just quickly shed some light on, on how you are kind of, looking at some of the cold chain related opportunities and fresh to supply. Are there any specific things that you've done at your end which are going to work?
I think our base work happens, since we work across all categories, our base work happens in a variety of domains. So what we have done right now is more limited to intracity and last mile. So what happens there is you need assets and devices and vehicles which allow products for last longer than their overall non-refrigerated time. So you don't always need a refrigerated truck, but what you need is sufficient amount of tools, etc., to get the product to the customer before it might go south, right? So there is a lot of work that's happening on that. It includes technologies such as having chill boxes in place, having right kind of packaging placed in the vehicle, having ice packs, and so on and so forth. But on the whole, cold chain as an area, I think it's always been spoken about, but there's a slower movement happening across years. As far as the overall domain is concerned, we still have in India almost 30 to 40% of our food supply getting wasted. You still have even vaccines, 10% vaccines, not able to reach the final consumer or reaching in a state wherein it's not supposed to. So there's a lot of work required there, but two macro factors which I feel is a very interesting domain for people to look out for. And one is India has to deliver almost 1 billion plus vaccines in the next 8 or 10 months, right? And you need to have an ecosystem across all of us in the logistics to enable all of that. Very recently, there was some conversation happening with the airline government on how intercity movement of these vaccines can be done in a better manner. But a lot needs to be built over there. And the good thing is that this problem statement in itself will allow us and everyone else to create an ecosystem which is much stronger and is created much faster than ever before. The other macro, which is fairly interesting, which is going to have some impact, is, and whichever way it goes, is the farm and agriculture bills. I think whatever is the final format it comes in, what will end up happening is that more people will get an opportunity to implement a lot of technologies which are already available out there in the market. The interesting thing about products which require cold chain is that apart from, it's not just about location tracking, and that's what you also need in cold chain is that you need to know the exact temperature a product has gone through across the supply chain. So a lot of work I think is going to happen. We're also working on it to see if we can capture that temperature aspect of it right across the supply chain so that you know if something is working well or not.
Sure.
Right before it happens. So that's just a quick summary on what's happening, but yeah, a lot of other things.
Sure, absolutely. I think these are all large topics. Just quickly, we are almost out of time. I would just want some last comments from Manoj, you first. Anything that you would want to highlight which we have missed?
Thanks, Rahul. I think 2 or 3 comments, right? So first thing is inventories are not bad, right? And supply chain prima facie job is to make product available. So that is the paradigm shift we are looking at. The second thing, on a forward supply chain, we were running behind the fill rates in terms of KPIs. From there, I think till the time growth is coming, we are okay with a kind of lower fill rate or not fulfilling everything, but on time has taken over the fill rate. So there's a second paradigm shift we are seeing from a supply chain perspective. And third thing is all AOP, LRP planning, etc. So an SNOP which used to happen, once in a month. From there, I think it's every week, and you have to be nimble every time to run. Even NPDs in FMCGs were kind of big bang, one NPD invest behind it. From there, we have moved to many NPDs. So I think we have gone for around 35, 36 NPDs, but they were all done at 3Ps. We have just launched them and then have seen if they're working. So there are paradigm shift in the way we are working as a FMCG or CPG companies. Okay, and that has helped us actually to grow. So that's from my side.
Sure, Manoj. Similarly, any last points from you, Kamal, quickly? Kamaldeep.
So I think, food safety, food traceability, becomes very, very important. And, our ability to communicate to consumers and assure him is definitely something that is going to be way too important. And as everybody has mentioned, having visibility throughout the supply chain also means a very, very close working, between various players in the chain, and much more faster implementation of digitization across the chain. Earlier it is limited to one organization or one retailer, but I think collaboration will be a win-win formula for everyone in the chain. So I think these are two other points much has been covered,
Sure.
which come to my mind.
Sure. Finally, Nigama, what about you? If there are any other technology trends that you see really playing a key role, maybe you can just quickly, give us a response.
Sure. I think I'll just add on to what Mr. Vinay talked about, right? I think he talked about how long-term planning might not be very relevant anymore, and those localized decisions and those agile decisions are more important. I think we are seeing that trend as well. Not really with supply chain. We are seeing in procurement, you have execution related technology which is getting established as the thing, right? The reason also is that earlier you cannot have so much data or process so much data. Now there are systems which process this, and hence the power of this data will actually go back and power your planning. That's the trend that we are seeing, and hence more emphasis on execution related technology which would come up, which would indirectly plan your supply chain models and planning, right? So as simple as local decisions going back and saying that this is the kind of contract you should be having, not really FTL contracts, you should go for PTL contracts and things like that. So we see that trend setting in not only with supply chain, really with many other departments, including procurement and finance.
Sure, Nigaman. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time. I would just end it with 3-4, key words that we took away from today's discussion. I think the ones which stay with me are agility, flexibility, connectivity, and of course, visibility and technology. I think all of those will play a very, very key role, and the changes there will really have a long-term role to play in the overall environment. Thank you, gentlemen, for the engaging discussion, and have a nice day to all the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was a very interesting session, I must say. There are some very important takeaways from the insights that all of you provided in terms of how the pandemic is propelling reinvention in the FMCG and retail supply chain and distribution models. Some are tweaks and some are paradigm shifts. And thank you so much, Rahul, for moderating this panel. Like I said, important takeaways for all of us. We wish each of you and your organizations the very best going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the third poll question of the day. Kindly participate in large numbers. These polls are for you, and we want to know how you are thinking on various aspects related to the FMCG sector. Kindly minimize the player button so that you can view the poll question to the right of your screen. You will have 60 seconds to choose your option. Post the poll results being displayed. We will be back on the other side with the next live session. Happy polling.